Good afternoon, everybody. I'll get my sympathy vote in quickly as well, because I've been limping along on a bad ankle this morning, but I've managed to get here, and it's been a fascinating day to listen to all the contributions from all the people that I've spoken to today. It's a hard act to follow. Some of the other hosts have been entertaining as well. I hope to be able to meet that in some respect. But first of all, I'll give you a bit of background about myself so that you can understand why I'm interested in this area. So originally, I'm an environmental scientist. I currently work for RTC North, which is a training and business development company that was formed from the back of the regional technology centres back in the late 80s. So for 34 years, we've been helping SMEs and businesses through local authority schemes and programmes, and latterly through Innovate UK Edge provision to help SMEs to bring new products to market, to develop new services, to grow and to internationalise. So I'm one of 400 innovation and growth specialists across the UK that are funded by Innovate UK. And we can be accessed whether you're in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. The idea being is that we can help you to strategise, access funding, find collaborative partners, to bring your products to market and to develop them and to access funding. So if you've got any issues, we are part of that innovation ecosystem that has been mentioned several times today, and I hope you'll engage with us. But I might be a brain by name, but I'm also joined on this panel by some significant brains, as we've heard already today. So without further ado, I would like them to introduce themselves as we address the subject of this panel, green innovation. Now, innovation, not necessarily green tech, we'll focus on, because innovation is much broader than just the development of technology, which hopefully will come out in the discussions. So I could ask the panel to introduce themselves, a little bit about your role and about the company that you represent. Jean-Michel.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jean-Michel Bellis. I'm the Director of Energy Solutions at Silver EMS. We are a regenerative engineering consultancy based in Manchester and London, and we focus on helping clients in a range of sectors, principally looking at cities, districts, estates and individual buildings on how we can help them decarbonise and reach net zero. And how we do that is we take a strategic view, understanding and learning about their buildings, how they use the buildings, what their existing assets are, and discussing their strategic objectives. And then by doing that, we analyse their baseline and develop decarbonisation solutions through our detailed engineering design team. And then once they become operational, we transfer that over to our facilities management and asset management teams, who help the organisations manage those assets as efficiently and effective as possible to maximise the carbon savings, but also cost savings, and also if they can make a revenue from that energy solution as well, we also help them do that. It's been very, very busy 12 months in our sector, and we look forward to continuing developing our team in Manchester and the Northwest as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. Amer.
Thank you very much. Well, finally, we're here. There's been multiple references of hydrogen, so thank you very much for everyone who's there and see me outside. Your check's waiting for you. But so my name's Amer. I'm the director of the Fuel Cell Innovation Centre based at Manchester Metropolitan University. Now, that's my day job. But effectively, over the last 10, 11 years, I'll start again. I'm here by accident. So my background is for 22 plus years. I've done various different renewable projects. And I tried to install a hydrogen fuel cell as part of the university estate 11 years ago. And I got laughed at. And I got thrown out the Vice Chancellor's office when I told him how much it was going to cost. But what that did do is it gave us the opportunity to set up a real partnership. That partnership has now evolved over the last 11 years into a £4 million research centre. We have 30 various different academics in surface engineering, electrochemistry, smart grid specialists who are now actively working in that centre. We support over 100 different businesses. We're writing strategies. So, strategies are great as long as people read them. So I've written multiple strategies around skills or hydrogen. I've written the hydrogen strategy for Greater Manchester. That's a pathway. It doesn't have money in it. It has an idea of where hydrogen technology could take us. that's now led to Manchester now having UK's largest consented green hydrogen scheme. It's going to be over at Trafford Park. It's got a grid connection. It will be built by 2025. It's finally happening. So the ambition, which started from a toy car, which I bought off Amazon, which I've still got, is now, a real credible strength. And we actually have developed this ecosystem, because alongside that, we developed probably the world's first targeted program of hydrogen education. It's currently delivered in 10 countries, gets translated into various different languages. It's a set of resources for teachers to be able to teach about hydrogen. It's a set of resources for the actual learner to learn about it as an economy. The most recent iteration of that was given to Polish government, who have just translated all the resources. We've done it as a proper collaboration between industry, academia, and it's now being delivered in multiple countries. So the ambition really is that $500 billion pipeline of hydrogen that is now formed for us to make a real inroad towards it for GM.
And really what he said is finished with that, because that was a fantastic summary of developing an ecosystem, attracting funding and getting people engaged. We might touch on that when we come around again. Michael, could you give us a background on we've already heard from you today, but for those that weren't here, I might have
actually got a glimpse in the presentation on what we do and what we think about. But I got the question in the break, what department do you actually work for and what do you actually do? So I did a bad job the first time. Second time, maybe better. At Siemens, we have an entity, it's called Advanta. That's the entity I'm from, and it's a professional services entity. So next to all the equipment, hardware, software that Siemens does, we have this entity that's focusing on consulting up to software implementation. And in the consulting piece, we focus on sustainability and digitalization, which comes very handy at this point in time. And if we look at sustainability, that's the part I'm from specifically, and we focus on a few topics because we noticed doing everything end to end is just too much, and you should focus, right? It's effective. It's next to decarbonization, you have circularity, and we have ESG leadership, which is in essence the backbone that every company builds up in terms of governance, reporting, strategy. And that's the three fields we cover. And we do that for public institutions, mainly for businesses though, to accompany them on their transformation. I keep it short like that.
Thank you, Michael. That was great. David.
Hello, I'm David Walsh. I'm a partner at Appleyard Lees, a colleague of Chris's who just gave the presentation. When I was at university in 1983, I desperately tried to get onto the environmental chemistry PhD course, but it was so competitive at the time amongst the students, I couldn't get onto it, and I did my PhD in surface chemistry instead. Following on from that, I went into patent law and became a patent attorney. But throughout that period, I've advised clients, industrial clients and spin-off companies on their innovations in this field, generally in the environmental field, particularly related to chemistry and polymers and plastics. So I'm very excited to have come full circle via a legal career to be doing everything we can do to promote green innovation and green technology, and to perhaps make better known what's actually happening out there from a global perspective.
Thank you, David. So we briefly touched on earlier that innovation is more than just the green tech. And coming back to you, Jean-Michel, buildings and infrastructure present a tremendous challenge. Some 40% of emissions are related to the building stock. So what future trends do you see that are just on the horizon, tackling building infrastructure and other energy infrastructures that require potentially a slightly different innovative approach?
Yeah, I think, with buildings, they're one of the main sources of emissions, not just in the UK, globally as well. And each country approaches decarbonisation in maybe a slightly different way, depending on the region that they're in. In the UK, in Manchester, for example, you've got a lot of historic buildings and a lot of older buildings that I think some previous panelists mentioned about, putting heat pumps in first before the fabric. I think from my perspective, I would probably argue against that, because, the fabric for the building is really fundamental, but the cost of doing that sometimes can be cost prohibitive. So, in terms of the technology and what is needed, it's really about a whole systems approach in terms of fabric, but also technology. So it might be, you know, a heat pump, solar PV, thermal store, and how they all interact together within a system. And the tech really comes from, you know, the AI and the systems that manage these energy systems collectively to really optimize the way that a building and the people that use it can deliver carbon savings, cost savings, and also decarbonize. I think, you know, going forward, the electrification of heat is a critical thing that's going to be even more prevalent going forward. And, you know, the government recently, I think today actually, they published a paper on a trial they did with air source heat pumps in 320 homes in the UK. And what they found was that, you know, the efficiency was 280% more efficient than a boiler, but the key thing was the sizing, but also the fabric. So I think in terms of the actual technology trends, it's more about the way the technology manages and optimizes the buildings rather than the actual, you know, equipment that's doing that. Because as we heard previously as well, the tech, so heat pumps are already quite well established and have been, you know, for a long time in Europe. So it's about how we integrate that into our energy system in the UK and develop that going forward.
We've had some discussions offline as well, and this seems to be a good time to bring in Michael with some of the things that you presented in your presentation, which is around data management and the value of that and how we can use that. So just tripping back to my notes here, obviously you've got lots of technology options that you can supply through Siemens and your connections, but should you be exploiting those opportunities commercially, or are they opportunities to give back to society? And what do you see as being the crux of effective green innovation for Siemens in particular?
Complex question.
It is, I'm sorry.
So first, I think it's important to define what an opportunity actually is. We've been talking about business opportunities a lot, and definitely this is something that drives us as a corporation. But then you have opportunities for society, as you pointed out, and you actually need to see what the investment that you put into developing the opportunity or the case behind it, where it goes into, right, and what opportunity you can exploit. And the second question was, what's the crux of how to use data?
Yeah, so how can we leverage data per se to help us deploy the right technologies?
Oh, I don't want to repeat myself, as I've shown before, but maybe adding up on that, as we had a discussion in the break, which was quite interesting, do we see regional differences in the ecosystem and enabling us to leverage data, enabling us to leverage the business opportunity behind it? Yes, definitely. If you think about a region where you think right now there's most progress in terms of green tech and opportunities, and it's for us, it's Middle East. And you wouldn't have thought of that. Why is it Middle East, right? And they've got a bit different baselines, or maybe a lot to make up for. They've got different fundings in the first step, but you would never really have thought of Middle East. Why Middle East? We talked about it, Latin America. Why Latin America? Nobody really thinks about Europe at this point in time, and that's really surprising. Yeah. So what I want to say to that is, as we're asking a bit about the crux, I think we need to enable an environment also politically, and don't mean regulatory, but I mean an environment that fosters entrepreneurial thinking and investments, and we've heard it before, also here in Europe.
Okay. The importance of information is vital. We've seen trends that have been monitored by Appleyard Lees, helping to educate us as to what are the current technological trends and what are the knock-on effects of that. So developing complementary areas of technology to support the deployment of that tech. Is there an opportunity, David, for Appleyard Lees to help inform on policy and also public behaviour by being part of that education programme to help people understand what they can do, what's possible, and influencing policy?
That's a really good question. I think generally what the patent profession does is it sort of clubs together through its institute, and it's certainly involved with parliamentarians in terms of influencing policy. There are a handful of firms like ourselves that are trying to analyze this area and move it forward. We haven't actually got together in terms of looking at how we could influence policy, but I think this is the sort of information which would be very good for government bodies to look at in terms of investment. I mean, just as one example, I think Chris pointed out there was an exponential increase in direct carbon capture patent filings, but it was 80. There was an exponential increase in insect proteins. It was 250. So there's three times as much innovative research going on in insect proteins than direct carbon capture. Now, if we want to solve the world's problems overnight in terms of carbon capture, that's the way to solve it. Everything else goes away if you solve that. Not everything, but a lot of things will just go away if you solve that. Very difficult problem to solve, and probably picking up on Michael's point, you know, companies are probably looking at that and thinking, this, you know, the way forward here is a quantum shift. But I think that sort of information feeding into government, you know, you go back to the Manhattan Project, you know, government's like, well, we need to solve this problem, and then you bring the brains together to sort it out. So possibly, yeah, we could definitely influence that. So
yeah, I think one of the things that has occurred to me today is dispelling some of the myths, not only about technology, but information that we've taken on as gospel over the years. But as technology advances, those opinions can change and should change, and we need to influence policymakers by educating them as well. So that there's an opportunity for people like yourselves and for the academics to come together and steer policy in that direction. So that's a much broader innovation ecosystem that we need to engage with. Amer, you touched on earlier the success that you've made of the fuel cell approach through Manchester Met, and that's not been an easy journey for you, and you've managed to create connections globally. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about how you went about that and some of the challenges about engaging with the wider ecosystem.
I think the first thing is just don't talk about, I'm looking at Steve now, don't just talk about hydrogen. You have to talk about hydrogen in a whole systems approach. So what's hydrogen's role in everything else that we're doing? So for me, hydrogen's about supporting electrification. And that's absolutely correct. And so, you know, whatever the right technology, so if hydrogen makes more sense in hard to abate areas. But in order, you know, I keep mentioning hydrogen, lots of people mention hydrogen, but really to make sense of it, is just follow where the money is being spent. Sounds a bit weird, but if you think about it, it's how you produce it. So ultimately, everyone wants green hydrogen. It gets talked about a lot. 0.2% of global hydrogen production is green. We use 90 million metric tons of hydrogen globally. It's produced from fossil fuels. So if you start talking about colours, we'll be here all day, but ultimately everyone wants to get to green. Then it's about how you use that in applications like fuel cells. And this isn't about one country or another. You've got to look at, there's now 52 hydrogen roadmaps that have been developed out in the last 2 or 3 years alone. 2 years ago, there was probably 26. So you can see at the rate of pace that this is moving at. Then, you know, it's about moving hydrogen. Moving hydrogen at scale is a real big challenge. So until you talk about those heavy industries that are going to benefit from this, until effectively you can get it to their door and not have to tube trailer it in some capacity or other, they're not really going to be interested. And the other point is they want to pay the same as they want to pay now. Then storage is another area. So how you store hydrogen is a real challenge. Then there's transport applications. So what are those? You know, it's heavy goods vehicles that make more sense. Buses make sense. Aviation, the future of aviation is heading towards hydrogen. So it's becoming, so you can see now why it's adding up to 500 billion and increasing day by day. Then it's non-transport applications, so backup power. But then it's looking at all of the different sectors that this will apply to. Like you're talking about energy, you're talking about transport, you're talking about your whole wraparound. But what doesn't exist is the support services that you need around it, the standards that need to be created. You know, you're talking about delivering hydrogen through pipelines into people's buildings. You know, the whole ideology, and that really stems from the biggest challenge and the biggest trend that needs to be created is around skills. So if you look at your supply side or your demand side, whichever technology you're looking at, doesn't matter whether it's hydrogen or batteries or whichever. I think we've got a real problem, not just in Manchester, but in the UK, around giving people the information around the opportunity for net zero. Because how many people that you meet on a daily basis actually truly understand net zero? There's a challenge. You know, we can talk about carbon literacy. Carbon literacy teaches you about the environment. Net zero, what if we call it net zero skills, will teach you about the investment decisions that need to be made. Now, today, in every single local authority in the UK, there's probably somebody who's making an investment decision that doesn't know anything about net zero. So there was, you know, the whole thing about buying boilers. Why are you buying boilers? You should be buying heat pumps, which are the here and now solution. Or why are you buying electric buses? They're rubbish. Buy hydrogen ones. That was just a plug there, sorry. But, you know, in the reality of this is it's giving that skills pathways for people who need to learn. And I think that needs to go from shop floor to boardroom. Give people that understanding of that, and it should be mandatory for everyone. And then you look at that skills pathway that needs to be created within the universities. So if you take a course like electrical engineering, which is fundamental to everything we're trying to do, it hasn't changed in shape or form for the last 20 years. So it needs to probably be looked at with that net zero lens.
Yes.
Then, you know, you're taking it upwards through the supply chain and bring that supply chain with you, because without that, we'll still be sat here next year saying the same thing, and we don't want to be doing that.
Yeah, there's some very key messages around education, and as Michael touched on in his presentation about transformational management, being able to embed the net zero philosophies throughout everything that we do, whether that be financing, prioritization, operational performance, and the like. I'm just going to perhaps say, ask for one thing from each of you now, just to close off the afternoon. What do you think is the main focus area for you that probably isn't in the main discussion at this moment, that you see just coming over the hill in terms of green innovation and trends? Just maybe one or two words, if you can, keep it short.
So I would say district heat in cities across the UK. The government have done, I think there's 25 pilot schemes, pilot cities for heat zoning, and there's regulation that's going to be coming down the pipe in 2025. So there's a big push for investment for low carbon heat, which is cost effective to decarbonize a number of homes. I think that's a major trend for this particular year.
And that's going to be a really interesting challenge around the business model, the revenue model for heat within local networks. Amer.
I think for any strategy that we have a spate of them. You know, in the lead up to COP, we had 12, 15 strategies that came out. So I think making sure that there's a national program that underpins those strategies, which covers tech, skills, education, and finance, critically, how you're going to pay for it, because a strategy is great, but until there's a program that underpins it, which shows how you're going to deliver on the ambition of that strategy, nothing's going to work.
Okay, okay. Michael, what's the panacea?
I must say, leveraging the tech stack, especially the intelligence level for our clients, and support them on it. That's the absolute focus. And can I add a personal word to that?
You can.
Well, I'm very glad to be here in Manchester. Some asked, why are you here? As it's such a city.
They didn't mean that as a defensive approach. Don't read into it.
I don't know, hopping over from Germany, and I was very interested in it because I see a lot of activity. Also, what I heard from my colleagues here, and also in comparison to other cities, also compared to Europe and rest of Europe, and there's a lot going on. And I wanted to find out more, and today proved also that point. A lot of discussions, and I'm happy to follow up on those discussions if you want.
Thank you, David.
Well, what I'd love it to be is director carbon capture, because I've just got, I'm a science fiction fan, and I've just got this idea, this enormous planetary size carbon capture machine that just pulls the carbon out of the atmosphere.
You've been watching Total Recall.
Yeah, just sorts it all out. But being more realistic, I think it will be, I think we're seeing a lot of developments from the big polymer companies in terms of polymer recycling. I think they'll start to recycle polymers on a much, much bigger scale. I'd like to see our oceans being essentially free of polymers, and I think that's coming. I think pyrolysis is going to move forward, but I think there's other technologies they will use as well. And I think within our lifetimes, a responsibility will be taken by the polymer producers to take it all back and to recycle it, because they've developed a technology that allows that to be commercially viable. And it's very much my hope, but also what I'm seeing as well.
Okay. So I think from today, we can see that we've got a whole range of very advanced technologies that we can take advantage of. The real challenge is in the deployment, in being able to attract the investment, being able to influence the policymakers, influence the consumers as well to adopt these technologies, apply different revenue methodologies, processes, business models. But if you need any help with that and in navigating that complex area of business development, talk to the likes of the Growth Hub, through Innovate UK as well, through the Edge service. And there are a number of providers out there amongst the consultancy, both at the small, medium and corporate level, to help you navigate that arena. In particular, for me, I think it's the engagement of the supply chain. Big corporations have a responsibility to engage with their supply chain and help them see the light and guide them towards a more sort of sustainable production process going forward. That way, we're all engaged right the way down to consumer level. I'd like to thank my panel today for being here to make their contributions. Please do take up any issues with them directly. They would love to have those conversations, particularly Amer, but put some time in your aside in your diary for that one. Thank you very much indeed.